So today is the final lesson. As I said, I'm based on Elizabeth Gilbert's book, A Big Magic. And we conclude with the tiniest, shortest little chapter of all. If you're reading the book, you know it's perfect because it's little. And the final chapter tells a story about the very blurry line between that which is sacred and that which is not sacred at all or secular. So I want to first start with some definitions. Like, what do those two words mean? So in my research of the definition of sacred, it led me to this statement. Something that is sacred describes something that is dedicated or set apart for the service of worship of a deity, is considered worthy of spiritual respect or devotion, or inspires awe or reverence among believers. The property is often ascribed to objects or places. So that was interesting. So then I thought, okay, well, if that's what sacred means, what does secular mean? And when I looked up the word secular, I found this. It's a state of being unrelated or neutral in regards to religion. Interesting. So I want to share the story that Elizabeth Gilbert uses to illustrate these two concepts and see if we can kind of understand them a little bit more clearly through the story. And if you've read the chapter already, this will be familiar. If you haven't read it yet, this is a preview, right? Mm-hmm. So what she was talking about was when she was in Bali, and we saw the movie together, Eat, Pray, Love. Remember when she was in Bali, Elizabeth Gilbert studied with a holy man named Ketut. Remember him? He didn't have any teeth, right? And he called her Liz instead of Liz. But anyway, he told her this story, and she relays it in her book. And he was talking about the fact that in Bali, Balinese dancing is done in the holy temples. And the dances are really intricate, they're transcendent, they're holy dances. And the dancing is done in these temples under the watchful eyes of the priests, and making sure that it's done the same ways it's been done for centuries, that they're sacred, they're protected, and they're passed from generation to generation, these holy sacred dances. And they're dances with the intention of recognizing universal perfection and connecting with the divine. And children begin learning these dances when they're really little. They start learning them. So back in the 1960s, tourism took its attention onto Bali, and tourists started coming to Bali for the first time, like en masse. And as you can imagine, if Balinese dancing was one of the things that made the culture unique and special, these tourists wanted to experience it for themselves. They wanted to see the temples, and so they would go into the temples, and they were willing to sit on the old, cold, damp stone floors and just watch this exquisite dancing. It's a huge part of the Balinese experience in your travels. So somewhere along the way, some Balinese person had the brilliant idea to improve the whole situation by letting these tourists stay in the resorts where they were, and we will bring the Balinese dancing to them. So instead of taking them out of their comfortableness and their pools and their Mai Tais or whatever, we'll just bring the holy dancing to them. And they can just enjoy it and watch the show. So everything was going just great until somebody got offended. Somebody got offended that these holy religious dances were being ruined by the monetization of it, for one thing, but also, not to mention that there was irreverence being shown to these dances because the tourists were talking to each other and they were drinking their Mai Tais and they were not paying attention. They were not being transcendent at all. Somehow these dances were not being regarded as the works of holy art that they were. So the people that got offended with that went to the priest, and the priest decided they would get together and solve the problem, and they came up with a brilliant idea. They decided they were going to change the dances being done at the resorts. So instead of the elaborate choreography telling a holy story, they just mixed all the movements up, and it was basically just gibberish if you were paying attention to the symbolism of the dance steps and things. Still beautiful and enchanting to watch, but no longer telling the same stories. So these holy dances would be preserved for the temples, and then these resort dances were the secular dances. They would be done in the resorts. And again, everyone was happy until they realized that over time, the resort performed entertaining dances suddenly became just as transcendent and spiritual as the original ones. The priests could see that the dancers were experiencing that same connection to the divine, doing these dances at the resorts as they were when they performed the holy ones at the temple. And matter of fact, the new dances, because they were fresh and more intentional, they were more moving and transformational than the ones that were being done in the temples. So, wanting the temple goers to experience the better dances, they started doing the secular dances in the temples, in the worship experience, and everything was confused, right? Suddenly you can see that what they had described as secular was suddenly holy, and what was originally holy was replaced by something holier, right? The tourists and the temple goers weren't really paying that much attention to the little bit of differences, so everyone was thoroughly confused. So Elizabeth Gilbert wrote it this way: It had all bled together. The lines had blurred between the high and the low, between light and heavy, between right and wrong, between us and them, between God and earth, and the whole paradox was totally freaking them out. So this is what happens when you step away from the world of religion and into the world of spirituality. So as I said, I was going to talk a little bit about the difference between religion and spirituality. So religion is a path where you're seeking enlightenment or a better life or whatever through studying and trying to emulate the spiritual experience that someone else had, usually a long time ago, and they wrote about it, right? And religions ask followers to believe in that holy person's experience and read certain texts and pray in a certain way and sing certain songs and practice certain practices so that you can get closer to God the way that one person or group of people a long time ago usually did. So spirituality is different than religion because spirituality is a path where you seek enlightenment or a better life, the same thing you're doing through religion. When you seek it through spirituality, you're studying and connecting with a higher power within yourself, and you have your own spiritual experience. And I encourage you to write about it, actually, right? So you might be able to relate to this, but what I have found is that it's been my experience that religion actually gave me more fear and more confusion. And spirituality has actually kind of relieved me of those fears that were given to me when I was young. And the magic of the soul is about looking at life through the different eyes. Exactly, your reading was perfect because those are your own spiritual eyes. They're the eyes of the divine looking at your life through you. And the magic of the soul is about moving toward more love and less fear. We talked about in Sacred Cup this morning that we as human beings, we're meaning makers. What I mean by that is we just are constantly deciding what something means because we have these like invisible label makers, you know, and we're labeling it. This is hard, this is easy, this is sacred, this is wrong, this is right. You're constantly labeling. Constantly. And unfortunately, most of us were not given the freedom to do our own labeling when we were young. Things seem to somehow come with their own label. You know, they were handed to us with a label. And we seldom have the courage to kind of peel it off. And so what I'm wanting you to all have is like this jar of goof off, you know, that stuff that you just use to scrub a label off. Then why did they put labels on things that are so hard to come off? For the same reasons probably our parents put really firm labels on things so they wouldn't come off, right? So I want you to take that goof off and take the labels off of everything. The question I used to ask myself, or ask all the time as a child, I'm sure it drove my family nuts. My favorite question was, who said? Who said? Well, you didn't have that popsicle first. Well, who said? Right? You can't swim in the deep end. Who said? These people are less than us. Who said? These people are going to hell. Who said? Right? I wanted to know. Who said? Actually, I still am asking that. Who said? Where did that information come from? What is the source of your wisdom on this subject? Who has more authority on this subject than I do? Who said? Who said? But if you want to follow me down this path of spirituality, I'm going to ask you to buckle your seatbelt, because it's not necessarily an easy path, and to keep your arms and legs inside the vehicle, because you're going to encounter some thought-provoking experiences. It's big. It's a lot of personal work. Trust me. It's so much easier to let someone put all the labels on everything. It's so much easier to just read a book and say, okay, and now I know what I believe, right? It's easier to do that. It's easier, but if you're taking responsibility for your life, we called it dominion in Sacred Cup this morning, taking dominion over your life, you're taking it away. Your dominion is yours. You're not giving away all your thinking to a holy man or a government or a book, or your family for that matter. All you have to do is simply comply with the rules and you're good to go. When you walk away from that, you're saying, no, this is my life. I'm going to decide. And I can tell you, I can remember over the years here in this community, I've had a few congregants would say to me, Reverend Laine, I love you. I love this place. I respect it, but I can't be in charge of my life. I really need someone to tell me what is right and what is wrong. I don't know how to do that. I can't decide for myself what I believe about God. There's got to be a bigger authority than me. You know, it feels sacrilegious for me to simply ask what I alone think about something. And that's just fine. Spiritual freedom and personal responsibility can be daunting. But the truth is, each of us as individuals kind of creates our own path to God. Now, don't get me wrong. You know, I'm not suggesting that anyone desecrates or disrespects or anyone else's holy objects or sacred places or any of that. I absolutely honor and deeply respect anytime I enter a Hindu temple or a mosque or a cathedral or a church of any kind. I understand that that is someone's holy place, and I show reverence to that. But I also deeply respect nature and other people and their paths, whatever they may be. I decide what is holy for me, and I do not decide what is holy for anyone else. That's spirituality. Everyone has personal freedom, and I encourage you to claim your own personal freedom. I'm going to quote Emerson, Ralph Waldo Emerson, who was a huge influence on Ernest Holmes, and he said, "Make your own Bible. Select and collect all the words and sentences that in all your readings have been to you like the blast of a trumpet." You know, I love to remind you around here that all of the sacred texts are trying to say the same thing. They're trying to say the same thing, that the human relationship to the one power is real, right? You can do things to move yourself closer in connection with that one power. So sacred texts do that, and myths do that, and ancient philosophies do that. But also Disney movies and a whole lot of Star Wars and stuff, you know. It's teaching you the same thing. There is a force for good, and you can use it. They're telling stories that illustrate that the universe is responsive to our choices and our decisions to be for good or be for destruction, for life or for death, for love or for fear. It's all those stories illustrating that. And I encourage you to gather together the stories that resonate with you. You know, there's a story in every major religion that says love changes everything. Find the story that works for you. Grab it. Claim it as your own. Write down the words that are strung together in such a way that it inspires you or encourages you. Gather those words and phrases and sentences and quotes and stories and claim them as sacred for yourself. Create your own holy text or your own Bible. Go even further and create a hymnal for yourself. Create a group of songs and music that make your heart sing. Songs that lift you up and inspire you and remind you of your inner goodness and your inner power. Songs that stretch you into deeper joy or tranquility. Songs that make your soul dance. You know, maybe it's the lyrics that get to you, or sometimes it's the rhythm or the music behind it, the melody. Gather those songs that have your soul signature on it and create your own sacred list of music. And then sing to the top of your lungs in the worship of the energy that you deem holy and sacred. And go one step further. Decide upon some spiritual practices that get you closer to your connection with the divine. You know, all around the world, people consider different activities as those that bring them closer to the divine. But what is important is that you find yours, the holy, the profound, the best inner feeling of peace and connection. Do whatever it takes to connect with that every day. What is it for you? How do you communicate with the Spirit? She was talking about just talking to God. Is it prayer, meditation, yoga, nature walks? I don't really care. Mindfulness, art, writing, repetitive physical motion, running, dancing, tai chi, those kinds of things. If you're going to live a spiritual life, a creative and fearless life, which is what we're talking about all summer long, it's important that you know how you are going to practice recentering yourself in that space. Practice and practice every day, religiously. You know, remember that I talk about that we have resources that flow through our lives. Time flows through our lives. Physical energy, money, talent, focus, appreciation. Those are the energies, and there are many more, but they flow through our lives. We give those resources away, and they flow back to us in constant circulation. That's a law, right? And if you want to improve your life, infuse those resources as they pass through you. Infuse them with your intention. Infuse them with your own power. And send them to things that lift you up, that you consider holy and important. Send them to things that you love. Spend them in deep appreciation for their source that flows it through you. The divine is also the source, and it's also the recipient. You're just a channel through which it flows. So in this summer of focusing on fearless, creative living, I'm inviting you to live by the guidance of your soul. Take the time and effort to fashion your spiritual self, your spiritual path, and then live it. Your life is like a holy gift that was given to you at your first breath. You know, Spirit took form in you to live as you, to live your life. Honor that breath. Honor your life by using it to explore this human plane fearlessly and uniquely as yourself. That's the whole point of this summer. So I want to close with a quote from Ralph Waldo Trine, who actually seems to be quite familiar and similar to the frequently quoted Ralph Waldo Emerson. How they have the same name, I didn't know. I didn't have time to look that up. But Ralph Waldo Trine wrote a book called In Tune with the Infinite, which is a very, very interesting book. And this is what he said. Let our churches give their time and attention to bringing people into a knowledge of their true selves, of their oneness with the infinite God. Such joy will be the result, and such crowds will flock to them that their walls will seem almost to burst. We need an everyday, this world religion. So what I pray is that you find for yourself here in this spiritual center a place that brings you into knowledge of your true self and your oneness with the infinite. And I pray that your joy is so deep and your fearlessness is amazing. And never forget you are divine. Everything is holy now. Will you join me in prayer? Here is what I know. What I know is that this moment is holy. This day is holy. Everything that I can see and hear and touch is holy. It is the divine informed spirit interacting with itself. And I claim that as my truth, and I claim it as the truth for each person here. And what I know is that the road rises to meet each one as they seek their own connection with God, as they seek their own people that stand beside them and help them be divine, help them live fearlessly and creatively. I'm so grateful for this community. I'm thankful for the opportunity to teach this amazing philosophy. And in that gratitude, I just let go and know this is a holy day. And so it is.
So it is.